Hi folks, here's another story about my adventures as a musician in in the 1960s, or shall I say in this case a kind of misadventure. I mentioned in a video about playing the Star Palace in Kiel in Germany. I mentioned at the end of that we decided to take up with the German manager, and this guy had approached us, said he'd get us work anyway, and he did. His name was Dieter Jürgens, and he was the kind of guy, he'd had stalls and stuff on travelling fairground. Kind of fancied himself as a bit of a small-time gangster as well, you know. Now he lived in a travelling wagon in a field at the back of a pub, and there was one time we did some work for him. They were all small clubs, but they were all pretty good because they didn't stay open till really late at night, and we had a day off a week, and it was reasonably good money. Anyway, the misadventure part came when we had a period where we had 2 weeks, and this was over the Christmas period. Excuse me, over the Christmas period 1965. We had a period of 2 weeks with no work between the end of one contract and the beginning of the next one. Now, with all these contracts, you see, with these clubs, you got your accommodation thrown in. So we had very little money. I mean, very, very little money, and no accommodation for 2 weeks. As I said, it was over Christmas 1965. The snow was several feet thick, and there was this old derelict bus, and I mean derelict bus, that had been kitted out with some bunk beds. The manager had used it. It had been used for the lads who used to work on the fairground with him. Stuck in the middle of this field. No washing, no toilet facilities, no nothing. I mean, it was just something, somewhere you could just get a bit of shelter, basically. And so we had very little money. It was cold, and we had just enough money for a bag of chips per day, you know. So we literally starving, basically. And what we used to do sometimes is to go into town, and in Germany, the pubs and bars, they didn't close at 11 o'clock every night like they did in England. They could be open 24 hours a day, well actually 23 hours a day. The only law was that they had to close for 1 hour in any 24 hours. You could choose whichever hour you wanted, any time, just so they could clean up and you know, make the place okay. So therefore, there was somewhere open pretty much all the time. So we used to go, you know, nurse a cup of coffee or whatever for a long time in cafes where it was warm. And we'd just go from one bar to the next. You'd make a small beer last you for a long time. Went from one bar to the next. You'd have one would close at midnight, so you'd go to another one that closed at 1, then you'd go to the next one that closed at 2, and so on. The only time in the 24-hour period where there was nowhere in town open at all was the hour between 5 and 6 in the morning. And the place that opened at 6 was the cafe at the railway station, opened at 6 in the morning. So when the last bar closed at 5 o'clock, we'd slowly make our way to the railway station, and we'd stand outside the railway station kicking our heels in the cold with maybe one or two other homeless kids hanging around too. We'd be waiting for the doors to open at the railway station. And when they did, we would go in and have a hot drink, or maybe if we had enough money, something to eat. And something I used to do, used to go into the railway station cafe, and I'd have what it was known as a Bauernfrühstück, which in German means farmer's breakfast. And it was a big pile of hashed up all together eggs, bacon, fried potatoes, stuff, and it was good. So occasionally I had one of them. There was another occasion where some young lady took me back home to her place, and that was the only time for perhaps a year that I'd had a real home-cooked meal with real boiled potatoes. And, wow, it's fantastic, you know, after living on currywurst and chips and whatever. So that was the odd thing, but we virtually semi-starving, you know. And on Christmas Eve, we were in this old bus. A couple of young girls who two of the other guys in the band knew. I'd never seen them before, but they showed up on Christmas Eve, came to the bus, and they bought 2 large bottles of spirits of some kind, I don't remember, and we got nicely drunk anyway. And after that, when the new contract started, of course everything was great again. We had good money, we had accommodation, we were warm, and you know. But these things happen because you're in another country where even if there was a welfare system, you don't know anything about it, or even know if you can access it or whatever. You don't know, you don't speak the language much, you don't know who do you see, you know. So we managed to get through that period alive, but it was tough. Part of my survival tactics were, I had this old, really old American Army parka that had belonged to my grandfather. It was a real old-fashioned one, as it had, the lining was actually real sheepskin, and it weighed half a ton. It was real heavy. I had a pair of knee-length boots, cowboy boot kind of things, and with the hood up, this old parka was almost like a house, and I lived in that. I didn't take it off. I didn't take my boots off for 2 weeks, and I'm sure that helped me out a lot. But anyway, I think if there's a moral in this story is, I'll just go back to saying, when I was a kid, I was a very picky eater, and I wouldn't eat this and I wouldn't eat that, tomatoes, my mother could hardly find anything that I would eat. Well, I'll tell you something, I've never forgotten this near starvation experience. I've never forgotten it, and ever since that time, I will eat anything, absolutely anything. There is nothing I won't eat and enjoy it, and also, no matter how much you put on my plate, be it not much, or if you pile it up high and give me too much, whatever, I will not leave any. I always finish my dinner and clean the plate regardless of what's on it. And it's all down to that experience. So maybe, just maybe, all the entitled people and all the kids nowadays, it wouldn't hurt for everyone to just see what it's like to go hungry, to be cold and hungry. Not for long, just for a week or whatever, but just to have that experience. It will make you appreciate what you have. So, that's taken a bit of a shine off the being a professional musician. Professional doesn't mean that you're doing great, earning lots of money, being rich and famous. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you don't have a day job. So, you know, hope you enjoyed something and maybe gained a little from this story. Thanks for listening.